I am live. I guess I am live. That's how this works. It is a Sunday night here for your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty here on Lions of Liberty. And something very rare has happened, something that has really not happened for ever, maybe ever, where it's Sunday night, a mere few hours before the next episode of Lions of Liberty is set to air, and I have nothing. I have nothing. I don't have a guest. Now, I had several guests. I've had like 3 or 4 guests that I've been trying to work with in the last few weeks. Nothing is their fault. It's 100% my fault because I am in the middle of what a lot of you know that I've been going through. It's changing countries, changing states, changing countries again. Um, and now we've been moving to Florida. We're in Airbnb for a couple weeks, and now the three of us, my wife, my stepson, and I, are finally in an actual house in Florida. Um, and we don't own anything because we actually we Gary Collins to this bitch. We Simple Life Now to this thing down. I did it first in LA and then again in Mexico City and then again when we were in the Yucatan. Every single time I cut down on a lot of the things I owned, a lot of the things that we were holding on to that we didn't really need, and cut ourselves down to almost zero before we kind of all moved here to have a fresh start together. So I'm That's all a long way to say I wish I could show you this. Why not? Screw it. We're live. I don't really go live. So let's see what happens. I'm going to show you where I'm podcasting from right now here. I'm sitting on some pillows. Let's see. Don't mind that. That's my shorts. It's fine. Nothing scandalous. I'm in basically an empty room. Now, at least I do have a podcast room. That's nice. I have a whole room dedicated to myself and podcasting and whatever other kind of trouble I get into here. But so I decided, screw it. I'm just going to go live and talk and see what happens because I don't do that. I never do that. I quite literally hardly ever do that. So here we are. Here we are doing that, just that. I do have this link out, the invite link to a few select friends and associates. So I do expect some guest appearances at some point along the way here. Otherwise, it might just be me talking for a while. But one thing I want to talk about is really just the idea of new beginnings, because I am certainly in the middle of a grand new beginning in so many ways, and it's really been something to have to break down and then rebuild. I broke everything down. I broke down the full time job I was at because it became untenable for me for reasons I've talked about before, mandate related reasons I've talked about before here. Um, but even besides that, the city of Los Angeles, the state of California, the people that I was around had become untenable in many ways. Now I'm excluding my very good friends and that's the kind of thing, but I'm not excluding all of my friends. I'm not. I mean, I have friends that laughed in my face and just told me to take the shot. So I wouldn't exclude all of my friends, but any friend that would happen to listen to this is definitely not, is definitely excluded. I would say. I mean, obviously, wherever you go, your friends are one of the most important things, and that was the hardest thing probably for me for leaving Los Angeles. Is I had built a family of friends in a way. I wasn't from Los Angeles. I didn't grow up in California. I just jetted off there as a wide-eyed. What's the phrase? Whatever. My eyes were wide and wild, so I don't care. 23, 24-year-old, a little bit after college to become a big shot in Los Angeles or whatever. And I did. I became a big time middle of the road libertarian podcaster. So so it worked out or something like that. But no, I mean I did that again. I did that 20 years ago. Basically, I broke down whatever I had. I hopped in a car and I drove to Los Angeles, not exactly knowing what I was doing or where things were going to go or how things were going to work out. I just kind of knew I had to start a new chapter in my life, and that's something that it's hard to say what may or may not have happened if the whole COVID thing didn't occur, but I think it was something I had thought about for a long time, especially as I met my wife, not long before all this COVID shit, and that obviously changed my perspective on a lot of things. I started thinking more along, not just, oh, is this a cool city I can hang out and have fun in and get laid in? Because it certainly was that. Or is this a place I can actually raise a family and show them a good life? And it definitely didn't check that box. I'm not saying it's not possible to have a good life there, but I mean, after the last 2 years, it was just no way. And then you add a vaccine mandate on top of it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for making the decisions that much easier for me. Because one thing that was never a difficult decision was to say, no, you're not going to tell me what to put in my body. Never a hard decision. Never for 1 second did I consider doing that. Now, I did consider other things, considered all sorts of things, ways around the rules, ways around things, around mandates, and this sort of thing. Hello, Reed. The Naturalist Capitalist has entered the chat. DancingIsraelis.com. I really think we should start a boy band called the Dancing Israelis. Someone should. I don't know if it should be me, but somebody should. Had a fun time meeting Reed Coverdale this weekend. This weekend? Last weekend? These things all run together at this point. But over at Yale Revolution, which was, man, it had been a long time since I actually been to a Liberty event in person. And if it seems like I'm all over the place tonight, it's because I'm probably going to be all over the place tonight because, again, no plan. But that's part of the fun, folks. We're all on this journey together here. But yeah, I mean, it was cool. It had been a long time since I had met not just other libertarians or other liberty-esque folk in person, um, but meeting people a lot younger than me. I don't know if I got older or if everyone just got younger, but this is the first event where it really felt like I was talking to kids, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way at all. I really felt the I don't know if it's the age gap, the experience gap, the life gap between myself and a lot of people that were coming up to me and talking to me after the live podcast we did. A lot of people that would come up to me, in the lobby and talk to me or what have you. And it was cool. It was cool. It's a couple different emotions going through me because there's people that have told me like I've followed your work for years. I love what you're doing. You inspire me to do this or that, and that's always a cool thing to hear. It's almost like too much sometimes. It's like too much weight. It's like, wait a minute, why me? Why am I just some guy who's currently just sitting in like an empty room with literally a couple boxes here and this microphone? Why would I be someone who would influence you? And it's really something to think about because I think when I started this podcast like 9 years ago, almost 9 years ago, the idea of course, my idea was to influence people, but it was in a very generic way. Influence people, but they weren't people. They weren't actual people with faces or names or anything that I could point to. So it was all very detached. It was more about the ideas. Oh, I've got my first guest. All right, I'm gonna bring him right in. It's LB Muniz, who I can't hear. So let's see. Is that my fault or his?
Any better? That's probably better.
It was yours, LB. What's up, man?
Nothing too much. What's up with you?
Things. I'm just here live. And
Oh,
totally knocked
live,
out of
live.
out of my game of what I was saying, but I didn't wanna keep you waiting. But, I was actually just talking about maybe this could help. How old are you, by the way?
29. Or no, I'm sorry. I just turned 30.
It's weird how that is. You actually forget your own age. I forgot that I was calling myself 42 for a few weeks before I was 42, and then somebody asked me my age today, and I forgot that I had become 42. But
that just happened. Yeah, that's what just happened in real time.
LB, for people that don't know you or people that somehow miss your appearance on Lions of Liberty, why don't you do it for yourself, and then we'll regroup here.
Yeah, so I'm a writer, podcaster, guy on the internet. I have a Substack, which you can subscribe to at beenawake.com, where I talk about news, philosophy, and mindset.
All right. Well, maybe I can continue on my thought process, and you can chime in yourself here because I was talking about how this last weekend I was at Yale Revolution, and there was a lot of people that came up to me who talked to me about how I had influenced them in some way, whether through my podcast, well, just through my podcasting. What the hell else do they know me from? But it was this. It's something that's really, really sat with me a lot because when people say that to me, I really have this moment of imposter syndrome or something where it's like, even though I know I've been doing all this stuff, I've been doing hundreds and hours of podcasting, writing, whatever it may be, for over a decade now. For some reason, when a real human actually tells me I influence them, it strikes me in a strange way. Even though obviously that's the whole point of everything I'm doing or anything that all of us are doing. Why write? Why podcast? Why do any of this stuff unless you're just trying to grift or whatever, like we all are. But why do this stuff if you're not trying to influence people? But to actually hear a real human in person standing a few feet away from you saying, "I've listened to you over the years and you've really influenced me," does this weird thing to me where at first it sounds cool and I like it because it's like, wow, I guess there was a reason I did all this. And there's the other part of me that thinks, well, that's just a terrible burden because what if you made the wrong decisions because of things I said? What if you pursued some dumb thing that I said to do and that I thought 3 years ago was a smart thing to do that I think is stupid now? So it's this thing where it's like, and I guess this applies to everybody in some way, whether you're podcasting or whether you're just talking to people in real life. But the idea of influencing other people only recently has that felt like a burden to me, like something that like I have to take more seriously. Because if I'm going to influence people, I better be goddamn sure I'm at least orienting in the right direction. Thoughts?
Do you, well, so how much of that do you think is tied to the fact that a couple of years ago you were just a podcaster without a family, and now you kind of have and now I know you have a family and you've done a lot to, make sure that you guys can be together?
Probably all of it. Damn, this is Lions of Liberty live therapy is what this is with LB Muniz. Yeah, probably all of it. And I think that's something I think about when I talk to these like young 20-something-year-olds that come up to me that are kind of like I was not even 20 years ago, not even 10 years ago, like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And it does make me think how much of what I say at any given time is just correlated to where I am at any given moment in life. And I guess that's just called experience. That's just called getting through life and looking at things differently. But I think for some reason this past weekend, like whenever I've been at events over the last few years, like PorcFest or various Libertarian Party conventions, I always felt like I was on more equal footing with everybody I was hanging out with. Like we were all kind of on the same mission. And I think for the first time, I felt like I'm diverting a little bit in my thought process while talking to people that were influenced by my earlier train of thought. But they're also telling me that they're influenced by my current train of thought. So it's this kind of conflicting thing where I don't want to slap someone in the face and say, don't listen to Mark for the last 7 years. Listen to the Mark for the last year and a half. That Mark was smarter. But really, it's all a progression. And it's all a part of my own process, which is why I do what I do. So I'll let you respond to that while I bring in our next guest.
Well, I think, I mean, to that point though, and I've talked about this recently as well, I think there is just a degree to which everybody's kind of on a path, right? And so just because somebody's where you were 5 years ago doesn't mean they're gonna stay on that path. They could end up where you are currently. And I think as creators, or whatever broad term we want to use to describe, the medium of podcasting and broadcasters who kind of are in this niche, I think as creators, it does make it difficult because, well, especially for somebody who has a pedigree, and I don't know how many hundreds of episodes you've done for Lions of Liberty, but
almost 600 now.
Yeah. So that's a long time, right? That's years and years of thought. There's something natural about us changing the way we think, and the fact that we can see who we were so vividly with like video. Like I've done video diaries at different points and like different journaling methods as a kid, right? And
coming to Brady Bunch here. I just don't want to interrupt LB, so continue, and then I'll bring in.
I remember watching one, to get a little personal, of like where I wasn't in the best of headspaces at the time.
When you say watching one, you mean like having a memory, or like just
no, I mean like I was poking around on my hard drive one day and I was like, what video file? Okay. Yeah, like what video file is this? And I can see a video of me from when I was like 20 years old, which wasn't the best time in my life, if I'm just being completely honest. And just, seeing like the way my mannerisms and the way I talk were different. And it's a very jarring thing that humans have never really had to deal with. Interesting enough, Brett Weinstein, Heather Hine deal with this in their book on evolutionary biology, where they talk about the fact that this could actually be harmful to someone's identity, because you can have like your past mistakes shoved in your face with such clarity that it can prevent you from moving on. So
yeah, I mean, just to respond to that, then I'll bring in these two other bearded characters that we have here. Like, this recently happened to me. Like, I was looking at pictures of myself from 4 or 5 years ago. Oh my God, another one. And I was much fatter, much more bloated. And I could just tell from my physical appearance that I wasn't, and I know I wasn't happy at the time, but like my pictures show it so vividly. And it just messed me up. But anyway, got some other people here. Got Matt Erickson. My God. What's up, Matt? Speaking of people that have gone through moves and changes recently.
Yeah, I was sitting here listening to LB talking about seeing videos of himself from when he
What
was
a crew. Oh my
when he
God.
was 20. And I was cringing because I would not be able to watch video of myself when I was 20. I couldn't even do it.
That's like Facebook.
Horrible.
Facebook memories are really cool because like
Justin Campbell, everybody, former Lions of Liberty video guy, now current just full-time farmer.
It's something like that. Like looking at Facebook memories, you get to see like cool stuff from because I created a Facebook account when Facebook first started back in like 2004. So I'll get memories from like back then, and it's like, man, why would I post dumb shit like that? Like what even went through my brain to think that I should say that? Like, and even in the more recent past, like looking at some of my political takes on stuff just from like 4 years ago, like, oh, really? Did I really say that? Did I really even believe that? Can that be right? Yeah, having that window into your soul is kind of weird to look back on past you. And I get what LB is saying. Like, that's something that the other generations didn't have to deal with. And I guess we don't have to deal with it. Like, I guess you could just delete everything immediately after you post it. But
well, we've all chosen to be internet people, so we have to deal with it. But speaking of internet people, I've got another one here. Tommy Salmons has joined us. My God.
What's up, brother?
Tommy looks like he's having the best night of all of us. I think I saw a beer there.
I do have a beer. I just got done eating biryani my wife made, spent all day making. So yeah, I'm having a good day, man.
Tommy is always having the best day of all of us.
I did think I lost a duck this morning, man. I got up and
this is the life I want. I want a life where I can wake up and wonder, wait a minute, did I lose a duck? That's the life I want.
I got up. I walked out of I was about to make my coffee, and I looked out the back window, and two of my male ducks were running, and they're never alone. My females are always right behind them. So I'm like, oh crap. So I get my coffee and I go walking outside, and I hear one of my females, and I'm like, okay, there's at least one. I walk out there, and she's running across my backyard, and the two males jump out of the pond and are like, we're over here, you know? And so she goes and joins them. They go get in the pond, and I'm like, okay, where's the other one? There's another one somewhere. Where is she? And the three come up to the front yard. We have the kiddie pool that the dogs like to swim in and drink out of, and the ducks like to get in there. So they get in there, and they're just squawking and squawking and squawking and going and going. And I'm like, oh, they haven't found the other female. So I'm like, okay, well, I got to go to church. So I went to church, and I got home, and my wife's like, I haven't seen the ducks all day. So I walk out to the pond, and there they all are. All four of them are out there on the pond. And I'm like, okay, you found her. Good. We're all good. So.
It's like duck Tinder going on over here.
It's funny, do a documentary where I just spend a couple weeks filming Tommy and his ducks.
At least my rooster didn't attack me today. That's a positive.
I wanted to respond to something that Justin was saying. He was talking about looking at his old Facebook posts and stuff. And tell me if you relate to this, because what weirds me out even more than the content of the posts is the voice that they're written in. Like the way that we related to social media or at least me, the way that I related to social media 10, 15 years ago was very different from how I relate to it now. And I occupied a completely different voice in the way that I posted. And it to me, it's weird because it's like, that's a different person. I'm listening to a different person talk, and not just in the kind of the metaphorical way that we're like, oh, I'm a new person now, but this is the way this person sees the world and the way that they communicate and the word choice and the tone and everything is all completely different from who I am now. And that's trippy. That weirds me out. And I don't know how to reconcile that.
It was a lot more angry back then for me. I don't know for you, but like
mine was
there was a lot more anger in that voice. Like I get fired up about stuff now, but even the stuff that I get fired up about, I still approach from a more humorous and like good-hearted position. Like I'm in a much better place in life. Like stuff I read from that I would post from back then, like I was really angry. And thinking back on it, like I remember that. I know now that I was really angry. And I think even then I knew that I was angry, but I didn't realize that it was like, it was that big a part of my personality that it like came out in the things that I said and posted.
I think one thing I've realized that I've had to really accept to myself is that like a lot of the anger that I poured into politics, not that it wouldn't be justified, because there are certainly like obviously incredible injustices that occur through our political system that are worthy of being angry about, but I wasn't necessarily angry about things that were inflicted upon me. I was angry about the system or whatever it may be. But that anger didn't come from that. It didn't come from the actual things there. It came from inside me. It came from me not being happy with myself. It came from me being angry about, who knows, a myriad of things. But it wasn't really the state or any set of laws, which are definitely unjust in many ways, shapes, and forms. But when you're that angry and you're spewing it out there all the time, that's not politics. That's you. And I see that. I see that in a lot of people. I see that in myself today still at times, where I can realize, okay, I'm not mad that someone did this political thing or tweeted this thing. Like, I'm just pissed off because I'm having some bad day and I got pissed off at something. And I think that's something that now we have this reflection of. Like, I'm sure even before social media or podcasts, people were doing this in real life, snapping at each other or whatever it may be, even if it's about a political argument, and then later realizing, oh, what an idiot I was. But now it's all there. Now there's no no fading memories. Now it's all there for anybody to pull up and show you what an angry dick you are or were. And it's just I don't know how to reconcile it either, because it's like I don't want to erase that. That's all part of my growth, and it's all part of what I want to be out there, in a way. But like you said, like reading Facebook posts from years ago, dude, I listen to I don't really do this anymore because I can't. But if I listen to my podcast from 7 or 8 years ago, it's just like, it's not even cringe. It's just like, who is that? It's like, who is that?
Yeah, I made the mistake of going back and listening to one from like a year and a half ago.
How long have you been podcasting? What are you doing?
I started in September of 20, I think it was. So like I went back and listened to one from like from like November or December of 20, like when I just started and I was really fired up about stuff. And I was like, God, did I really dedicate like 20, 30 minutes to just talking about that topic?
A lot of the resentment that you see, though, is like you said, it's based off of your own failures and what you've failed to do. And it feels a lot better to go online and attack somebody else for what you see them doing than to go out and change your own life and do something for yourself.
I was thinking about that today as I was scrolling through Twitter, mindlessly killing a few minutes. And people always say, oh, Twitter is just like people, it's just like the place people go to fight. And, people, it's a hell site and all these other things. And yet everyone who says that never leaves. They just sit there and they complain about it and then stay there. But it occurred to me that it's not necessarily, I think, that it's a place where everyone goes to fight. It's that it's a microblogging service. The whole purpose of the site was for people to go deliver their own thoughts. So people show up nobody shows up to Twitter thinking, okay, what am I going to learn here today? People show up to Twitter to say something. They want to go say something at other people. And then they encounter other people who are also there to say things. And so they just start saying things at each other. So everyone is just sitting there talking past each other. Because nobody's there to be productive. Nobody's there for like a productive experience. Obviously, this is hyperbole. There are some people there who genuinely use it productively. And probably all of the best friends I have in my life, I met through Twitter, not just through social media, but through Twitter specifically. So it's like, I can't hate it too much, but at the same time, I guess it's just like an interesting social experiment. It's like
you can go there for
a mirror for humanity to see itself. You
can go there for the news ticker. You can go there for the really interesting, deep, threads on any subject you can imagine, right? But that might be why you log in. But what you stay for, what entertains, I think, especially in the political space of Twitter, what entertains us is the back and forth.
The train wreck.
It is the train wreck. It is the argument. And that's something of, like, I've talked about it, but I had another project that before I started Been Awake, and I took like a year and a half where I was just working and not really doing any writing or anything creative like this. And in that time frame, I completely changed a lot about myself, but also, but more importantly, when I came back, I was far more conscious of the performative element. Whereas in the past, that person before that time on social media was like the happy warrior who just thought everybody could get better if they just understood my perspective.
That was me.
Right? And instead of being a being a performer to attract people who want to, see the product, buy the product that I'm selling, right? Which you can, subscribe at beenawake.com and see what that product is. But to the point,
shameless plug incoming.
Always and every time.
Outgoing.
I think that is like an interesting shift in perspective, because I think like back in the Ron Paul days for me or what have you, I truly thought, maybe I didn't think this logically, but I acted like I thought this anyway, that if everyone just learned this thing, that the secret of Austrian economics or freedom or liberty or however I was kind of selling it to any particular person, if only they just learned it, like obviously they're going to see things the way I do.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's clearly what's going to happen. Like there was no question in my mind. It was just about getting through to them, letting them actually see it. But it is a different thing when you switch that mindset and you stop trying to convince everyone of everything or convince everyone of your perspective, and you just decide, I'm going to put myself out there as strongly as possible, which will turn people off. It's a totally different mindset than trying to change everybody's ideas about things or ideas about how the world should be. It's putting yourself out there as strongly as you can be, which will include warts and all, or what have you. But it's going to include pushing some of those people out, but it's also going to bring you closer to the right people. And I think that's been the biggest shift in my mindset about how to communicate in the past year and a half.
I remember when I guess it was like 2019. I started podcasting in 2018. I guess it was 2019. I was chatting with Pete, and I was talking to him. I was like, "Look, man, I was like, I kind of want to do something a little different than what I've been doing, and can I run some ideas by you?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And so I was like, "I'm thinking about doing some stuff that's a little bit more personal, like you said, laying out the warts and just being myself. Let people see that I'm flawed too." I think people get the idea because we get on here and we talk and we read a lot and we search through these ideas and change our minds and, work with each other on different projects and all this stuff, that we don't have problems. And I was like, I want to kind of talk about my past and some of the stuff I've been through. And he stopped me right there. He's like, "Look, man, everybody has something to learn from somebody else. And I love hearing other people's stories because I'll hear something that I'll connect with and that'll help me work through something I've been working through." So I've always tried to incorporate like that honesty into my podcast of just being who I am and being honest about my flaws and my mistakes and, things I've learned. Because, my grandpa told me years ago, long before he died, that a smart man learns from other people's mistakes, or a smart man learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from other people's mistakes. And too many times in my life, I chose to be smart and not wise. And, if I can give somebody out there some wisdom, then I think it's worth like shaming myself and kind of opening myself up just a little bit.
Well, we're smart, not wise, because we always think that, well, I'm going to do it different than what he did.
Speak for yourself, redneck.
I'm not going to. I'm going to do it different than he did it. I'm not going to fuck it up like he did. He's definitely not as smart as I am. And then obviously, like, that's not the way the world kind of works. And
yeah,
we do tend to make the same mistakes if we don't learn from them and pay attention to them.
Right.
Speaking of being smart and wise, I never do this, just like I never go live with podcasts ever. I never do what I'm about to do, what I'm about to attempt. If you guys want to join me, because we actually do have a sponsor for this podcast, and I think you guys might know the subject. Speaking of smart and wise, one of the smartest and wisest gentlemen that I have had the pleasure of meeting in the last couple of years is a man by the name of Buck Johnson, and this MFer is running for city council in his beautiful, beautiful, truly beautiful town of Lockhart, Texas. And
spent all day there today.
Oh, excellent. Well, you can attest to the doesn't it feel like you just like drove into the past when you roll into Lockhart?
Oh yeah,
I love Lockhart. It's gorgeous. And I'm actually working with I was actually talking to Buck like 2 weeks ago. I'm trying to work out a weekend where I can go up there and knock on doors with them. So
we should all go at the same time.
that would be awesome. That would be awesome. We're talking about sometime in October. So they did change up the way my schedules are being operated, but I'm trying to get up there sometime in October.
If you want to help send all of us to Lockhart, Texas to do a fundraiser for Buck, you too can support Buck, who is being supported by our friends at the Mises Mayors. Wait, what is? See, this is what happens when I try to do a live read. Formerly Mises GOP, now
I think isn't it Mayor's Caucus?
Mises Mayor's Pack.
Thank you, LB, who's not making any money from that. The Mises Mayor's Pack. But these guys are supporting awesome candidates, and Buck is basically I would say sort of the trial run. This is the
prototype.
The prototype. There you go. Buck Johnson is the prototype for how this pack is going to run and the kind of people it's going to support and the kind of legislation it's going to try to implement locally. I think one thing all of us probably agree on at this point is that, like, if we're going to have impact politically, the best way to do that is going to be locally. And one thing we've all seen over the last couple of years, I've seen it certainly comparing myself living in LA for almost the last 2 years, compare myself to Buck, compare myself to Tho Bishop in Florida. We lived vastly different lives, and it is because of the local politics. So this is something that can't be ignored. And what Buck is going to be doing is keeping the very fastly encroaching woke politics of Austin out of Lockhart. So I really want to encourage you guys. I will say myself, like, just on a personal level, I mean, Buck Johnson is one of the people I'm just been the happiest to have connected with over the past couple of years through podcasting in real life. And I can say he's someone that I'm very proud to endorse and say, like, if you are, I don't care if you live in Texas, in Lockhart, I don't care if you live in Ukraine or Zimbabwe. If you are a fan of liberty, Buck Johnson is someone who's worthy of your support. So please do head over to the website that I will tell you about as soon as I look it up. That's right. MisesGOP.org/Lions is where you can support the Mises Mayor's Pack, which is going to be and is supporting the candidacy of one Mr. Buck Johnson. So I don't know if you guys are allowed to say anything legally. I have no idea how PACs and advertisements and fundraising works, but I think we did. I think we did everything fine.
I don't care. I
love
Buck.
Doesn't care. So.
I love Buck. So yeah, go support him any way you can. Whether you want to become a patron or you want to send him money via PayPal or you want to go through the Mises Mayor's Pack or however you want to support Buck. Yeah.
Well, the Mises Mayor's Pack is who's paying for the ad. So actually, I do have to say that you have to go through them for this ad purpose. But Tommy wasn't paying anything. So, you know, that was actually the first. This is episode 598. That was the first live read in the history of My Particulars. Now, Brian does them every week because he does everything on the fly. But first time I've done a live, I mean, it wasn't a read. That's why I didn't know the website because there was no reading involved. But history is being made every single week here, gentlemen.
Buck is one of the best human beings I've ever met. He is one of the most genuine, sincere, authentic, down-to-earth, straightforward dudes you could ever talk to. I'm obligated to say all this because he took me out to dinner on Friday night. So.
We're all just paying Buck back for various favors. He let me stay in his house for a couple nights. Like, let's see, what else are we owing Buck now? But yeah, even besides that,
if you see him in person, be sure to give him a kiss on the cheek. He smells nice. Always.
That's true, he does. Yeah,
and his shirts always fit just perfectly. Not too big, not even too small though. It's just right.
I shared an RV with him at Childerberg.
Yep.
I can confirm that Buck smells good.
Vote fuck Johnson. He smells great and always delivers.
All right, I too think Buck is a great guy.
The second half of the show is just going to be a Buck love fest. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like my Friday night.
Top 5 things you like about Buck Johnson each, starting with Justin. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
There's too many.
Hold on. I'll just go get Beatrix. She can come do this.
There's a joke there somewhere, but I'm not going to pursue it. All right, what else, guys? Because I don't do this very often. This whole live thing. I know you guys are always just firing up the old live button, like Erickson's doing 7-hour podcasts with Cyprian, like it's nothing. Like, but this is not where I'm the most comfortable. So
we were talking about stuff from the past, and which got me thinking about kind of a stretch from around like 2010 to about 2015, where I really didn't read anything. Have y'all had and I can see from my social media posts and stuff from that time that
you weren't reading much.
That
sounds
weird.
like a non-reader's voice.
That sounds weird, but there was
Bill
definitely
Hicks
a rut.
joke. Looks like we got ourselves a reader.
There was definitely a rut of the types of things that I was posting during that time where I could kind of tell that like I wasn't engaging or stimulating my mind on anything. Like I don't think I was even really reading fiction type stuff regularly at that time. Like I wasn't reading at all. And I can tell that a lot of the posts that I made, like earlier posts when I was reading a lot of fiction and stuff, I was a little more weird and goofy and angry. And then later on posts, when I was reading more again, I can see that I'm actually engaging with ideas and thoughts and stuff. But that like 5-year period, it's just like there's no substance to anything that I had to say at that time in my life. Have y'all gone through stretches or anything like that where you, looking back, you feel like you just kind of like lost 5 years to middling in midwittery?
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, yeah, for sure, and it was longer than 5 years. As a
45 years for Tommy.
More, well, almost. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm like, is that how you spell V? But no, there was a period where I was a giant fan of classic literature when I was in high school. I read a lot of Dickens, and I read a lot of the beatniks and all kinds of stuff whenever I was in high school. I didn't start reading nonfiction, I don't think, until I was in my 30s, probably mid to late 30s, just before I started podcasting. But I was a huge fiction fan. But there was a period when stress had taken over my life, and I was dealing with a really bad marriage and trying to raise kids and just trying to keep my head above water and trying to stay sane, that I was so embedded in my own issues and my own problems that I didn't make time. And I do regret that. I think it probably would have helped me if I would have, it would have helped me at least mentally to cope a little bit better if I would have made time to continue educating myself. But yeah, there was a period like that. It was probably about 10 years where I didn't read hardly anything.
I think that bad marriage thing might be a common theme for us.
Yeah, you and I have done an episode on that.
Yeah.
I can relate to this minus the marriage part, but everything else is exactly the same.
Yeah.
I was just smart enough not to sign on the dotted line in that situation.
Yeah.
Something kind of related to this might be an interesting conversation. Someone tagged me in. I have to apologize. I don't remember who it was. Someone tagged me in a tweet and said something like, I think it actually might have been Andrew, tagged me in a tweet and said, like, how do your ANCAP priors, like having gone through that stage in your life, do you think that was necessary to get where you are today? It was something along those lines. And I don't think I've answered it yet. Maybe I did, and I'm just talking out my ass, but I don't think I answered it because I don't really know. I don't have a clear answer for that for myself. I basically can land myself solidly on both sides of it. So what do you guys think?
It was necessary to my own evolution, but I don't know if it's a necessary step that people need to take to believe this.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was going to say. Like for me, yeah, because it taught me just enough distrust to read enough material to get me to where I am. So I knew better that like becoming an ANCAP and going through that stage got me to a position where my mind was open enough where I thought everything was just lying just enough for me to go somewhere else. And it kept me curious and kept me moving forward. But I don't know if it works for everybody, because some people just dig in their heels in that stage and think they have it all figured out. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people, especially, and this isn't like really, I don't mean this in a derogatory manner, but a lot of young people will fall into that trap of thinking they have it figured out long before they have anything figured out. And sometimes it takes some really painful lessons for them to to come to grips with the fact that they have more to learn.
The biggest
more
clue. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say
Jinx.
the biggest clue that you have everything figured out is when you start realizing that you don't have everything figured out and you're not gonna.
Well, super jinx, because I was going to say the same thing.
The more I learn, the less I know.
Yeah, right. I think for me,
it's
the
the
way I've
opposite of the more
described
you know. Like, the less you know, the more you learn.
the way I've described it to myself, like in the past, not necessarily speaking directly about this, but in passing, I've said that to me, the ANCAP evolution part was really about deconstructing everything I believed before. And for me, at least, I had to go through that deconstruction phase to kind of strip everything down to the studs and start really looking at like what were my base presuppositions. I had to get all the way down to the foundation. And the way that what I started realizing is that I was being induced into thinking that the key to a healthy society and being a healthy person was like stripping everything down to the foundations and then fighting anybody who tries to build anything. And when that realization kind of was coming to pass for me, that's when I realized, okay, I stripped everything down to the foundation. Now I need to start building it up. So instead of looking at, okay, what other thing can I deconstruct? What other thing can I take apart? What other thing can I tear down? I need to start thinking, okay, how do I build? What goes into building something, creating a solid foundation, creating stable construction to build back up, build back better, I suppose. That was kind of the pivot that I feel like I've gone through for the last.
Oh my God!
years.
Speak of the devil. Is this even legal?
Oh,
Now,
Yeah, there might be conflict of interest here.
now there might be conflict, but I think we're far enough away from the paid advertisement to make it fine. But we'll check with the lawyers.
That was a very kind advertisement and kind words from everyone. I was listening to it. I was watching, Mark, you'll appreciate this. I was watching the biography on Degeneration X premiere tonight. And I
Isn't
saw
it so wild that guy that was in that documentary you just watched doing all that wacky shit is now the head of runs that whole company?
Yes.
That's amazing.
And I saw Matt put this in his Discord, and so I clicked on it. And right when I clicked on it, you guys said a bunch of nice words. So now I want to come on and share the love and say hi.
To be clear, that was a paid advertisement.
I know. I appreciate it that when someone pays you,
everything
you
should be taken with massive bricks of salt.
And Matt and Tommy need their cut now too, and Justin.
right. Start paying up, Buck.
All of us owe Buck a favor or two of some sort, and this all resulted in this entire podcast, really.
Well, hello.
I'm gonna title this a love letter to Buck Johnson, an unpaid love letter to Buck Johnson.
I do have something to add on to what Matt was just saying, because something struck me as he was talking. And I think that when you start digging into this kind of quote unquote hidden knowledge of the government, and you start uncovering all these conspiracies like Operation Mockingbird and Operation Northwoods and all this stuff, and you start reading.
Remember when that stuff was shocking, and now it seems like such low grade.
Yeah,
like,
it's so easy.
Everybody knows about that. Like,
right, and you start reading in on the WEF, and you really start digging into this stuff. Like there comes a point where when you first discover like anarcho-capitalism, libertarianism, there's a point where you're really arrogant about your knowledge because you're like, oh, I got all this knowledge nobody else has. But then there comes a point to where it humbles you, because it's like, oh crap, I got all this knowledge nobody else has, and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
It's like, so you go from arrogant to humble, like in the change, I think, in what we're experiencing as a group as compared to those that still cling on to that label and disregard what we have to say, is that we've reached that point of humility where we understand that it doesn't matter how much we know. It's not going to change anything. And we better start putting like the nose to the grindstone and taking some chances and taking some action and making a difference, or it's going to just continue to go downhill, and it's going to reach a speed to where nobody's going to be able to stop it.
one thing that keeps coming up a lot is I hear a lot of like, but you learned this thing and you believe this thing. So how could you believe that, continuing to talk about it so that other people believe it couldn't be productive? But I don't think anybody here disputes that you can get some people to believe a thing, that you can get a lot of people to believe a lot of things. That's not the question. The question isn't, can I get a bunch of people to believe in this thing? Obviously, yes. The answer is yes. I've met a bunch of people that believe in the thing. Yeah. Yes. That's not the question. The question is, so what does it do? Does believing in the thing do something?
Now, how do you get those people who believe in it to like do more than?
How do you get them to look in the mirror and fix their own life before they try to tell everyone else how to fix theirs?
Well, believing a thing doesn't stop the thing from happening. It doesn't matter what you believe. It's whether or not you can stop it. Whether or not you
can believe I don't need to breathe air. I can breathe water now. I believe that.
Well, it does. That's not even what I'm saying. It's like there's a trajectory that is taking place. And it's like, it doesn't matter if I get somebody to believe that trajectory is taking place. What matters is I can convince that person to follow me into stopping that trajectory, whether they know it's taking place or not. It's convincing that person that we need to be at point A in order to stop that trajectory. So however I have to sell point A to them, that's whatever. Because the point isn't believing that the trajectory is taking place. The point is stopping the trajectory.
I think what's interesting about us having this conversation versus how this conversation would occur in not amongst a bunch of people who are broadcasters, creators, like I said, of various kinds is something that I say on my show, which is that a good question is better than a great answer. Because you can have great answers for something, but a good question leads you somewhere better, I feel. And to that extent, I think there are people who, I think most people wake up or grow up and they're looking for answers. And then there's other people who grow up and they look for questions and they look to then answer those questions. And that extra step is where, arguably, that's where new things are discovered and new ideas can happen. So to the broader question of trajectory, it's just about those moments in time where certain people asking the right questions can adjust the trajectory of whatever you want to talk about, the herd of humanity, as it were. Right. And I think that's an interest, and I think that's certainly something I'm very conscious of in what I produce, is trying to walk that line and bringing people along that philosophical method of questioning things, which is I think fundamental for the pursuit of knowledge. But I don't think everybody has to pursue knowledge, and I never have. I think for some people it's enough to figure out the basic answers you need, and then have a successful life because of it, whatever form that takes. And there's nothing wrong with having that impulse. What can be where it gets confusing is because of like the school system where you're told to go, that you have to go and have this liberal arts education, as it's called, that where you're asking these questions until you're 22, 24 years old. You can get confused with the fact that, oh, well, if these people are saying that it's like these people say, well, that I have to have a politics, I have to have a completed worldview, I have to have a worldview that I have to defend at the drop of a dime. And I think that's wrong. I think that's too much to ask of most people. And and so to whatever's left of that for the people who ask questions, that's, I don't know. I just think it's a different path.
When we talk about believe, we kind of act like, by we, I mean, generally we act like it's kind of self-evident just what believe means. Everyone just kind of agrees. We all are talking about the same thing. But if you start kind of digging into what people believe about what it means to believe, then it becomes pretty clear that to a lot of people, believing something means thinking about it. It means like thinking specific thoughts, having specific thoughts about it. And like, that's all that you need. And you can get into pretty deep theological weeds pretty quick with this.
Right.
But belief is to be coherent. belief must necessarily have an action component to it. What you believe is what you act on. Because if I believe that there's a bus driving by in front of me and I don't want to get hit by that bus, and then I step out in front of the bus, then I clearly didn't not want to get hit by the bus. Clearly some part of me wanted to get hit by it because I saw it and I stepped out in front of it. When you are acting, you're making a declaration of your belief, of your actual belief, not just the thoughts that you have in your head.
So this is like many libertarians who screamed and raged about vaccine mandates, and then the first second something was threatened, whether it was just a convenience or food on the table, something legitimate, I understand, they did it. So
we talked about,
they don't really believe in that as much as their actions show that they
talked about the belief stuff on James Gentleman's final episode, episode 100 of Blackbird Podcast. That like when you start engaging with people and breaking down what their belief systems are and the things that they actually like understand, like the average person, you get to what Matt was talking about, where they don't believe anything. They just have this pre-programmed stuff that's been fed into them, and that's what creates their belief system. Like, a belief system has to have some sort of foundation to it. It has to have that, like Matt said, that action step. Like it's something that you can not only talk about, but that you understand, and that you don't just mimic the words back that you've heard. You actually like dive into it and you put it to use in your life. And like, unfortunately in society today, a lot of people don't have that. Like it doesn't go past just a surface level of what they saw on CNN or, something like that.
Well, to answer a question that was said before, or that Matt asked before, which is like, was your quote unquote ANCAP phase necessary? If we rephrase that question to, was reading about praxeology and human action, is that something that you need in order to reach the whatever worldview that's kind of taking shape around us, if you will? I think the answer is yes. And because that's kind of the insight, that because Matt, you kind of inadvertently or purposefully said the insight of human action, which is that you can judge people based off the actions that they take, not the things that they say. And it's and again, if we're going to split the world into two types of people, you can look at people who want the world to be as they wish it to be, and the people who take the world for what it is. These are perennial classifications that humans have used for forever. And I had a recent interaction that was kind of illuminative of this, which was I had a friend stop by that I hadn't seen in a long time. We went and got dinner, and we were all hanging outside, just like catching up, talking about the world. And the subject of astrology came up because she had been like, I guess, more interested in it recently. And I kind of, and she's like, well, you seem like you don't like it. I'm like, well, I mean, I know a lot about it. First off, like I'm somebody who like looked into Zodiac and stuff a lot as a kid because I thought it was fun and I liked Harry Potter. So I wasn't coming from a place of ignorance. But we kind of got to
Harry
a point.
Potter as a kid, what a youth this is.
Yeah.
I am the youngin in this. I
remember my 30s when Harry Potter came out.
Oh no, Harry Potter was like, I read Harry Potter.
I was into Captain Caveman when I was a kid.
Yeah, 8 years old. But
and now you are Captain Caveman.
But we got to a point in the conversation where I was saying like, well, okay, so let me make sure we're talking about the same thing here. I'm not talking about you read your horoscope every single day and you kind of think that applies to your life. Astrology is like the stars rule our lives.
LB's right? like I'm talking about space is fake, bitch. Like, what are you like?
and she said basically like, well, I'm talking about reading the horoscopes at the Chinese restaurant that I like to go to. And that's what, and like, but that's okay. Both people, and I said, and I quipped later in the conversation, like, you said that, and it's funny, and I'm the person who wants to write that menu that you're reading. Like, I'm the person who wants to write the thing that you're taking and then incorporating into your belief structure, the things that you actually act upon. And again, just to the different, I think that speaks to, again, if I talk about ridding ourselves of the egalitarian delusion. The egalitarian delusion is pretending that every single person has to be just as interested in exploring ideas, and so. And that's why it matters then who's giving people the ideas that they're taking and running with, running away with. And that's again, and that's when you get into the conversation of power and how do you take power in a way to actually influence the world for the good. There's a little chatter in the chat about the Ring of Power, and funny enough, I just watched
the chat is like its own debate series. Like right now, there's a whole separate parallel universe where we're talking Nisha, Evola, like it's wild in there.
And it would, like, the question was like, can you destroy the Ring of Power? And the answer is yes, but that doesn't destroy power itself, right? That was I think that's at least part of what Tolkien was getting out. And I just happened to rewatch the Fellowship of the Rings extended edition, which, man, it holds up.
Well, I mean, it goes back to the whole like libertarian abolish this, abolish that, abolish the FDA, abolish the IRS. Cool. If you can abolish those little tiny rings, but they're going to come right back if you don't. And you can't, if you don't change the reasons they exist in the minds of the people or what have you, if you don't, and now I think I would, that's probably something I would have argued like years ago. If you just change the will of the people, then but now even listening to myself say that sounds silly. I mean, power is going to exist. So how do you deal with that is the question. That's really the only question. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
As opposed to how do you destroy that?
I think Plato had the right idea when he was talking about you have to be weary about people that are seeking power, because those that seek power are likely to abuse it. So there's that. This
is the anti-ad for Buck Johnson.
Yeah, I know.
Well, yeah, no,
those who seek power for power's sake. That's
right.
difference.
Yeah, he was talking about like don't seek power for power's sake, because those are the people you have to be weary of. Those are the people that you have to watch out for. He was like, you want to seek truth, and with truth comes the power. And so you have to be very careful about how you engage in the power dynamic. I mean, obviously, but at the same time, you have to be aware that the power is going to exist. And this is why there was that whole there was this kind of like meme or the mimetic thought that you wanted the person that did not want the power to be the person running for office, right? Which is why there were all these moves to kind of elect people that did not want to be elected. There was this idea that you were going to try to force them into running for office out of sheer duty, and which is not the way things operate, and that's not the way people work. So it's there is something to be said about watching those that are seeking power. It's just you have to be very weary of anybody in that position, unless their name is Buck Johnson.
Tom,
are you trying to
polite to interrupt, but he's been taking notes vociferously.
Or Ron Paul, he's obviously the one you think of that seemed to be a genuinely good person.
Yeah.
Seeking power, but not really seeking power.
Right. What were you going to say, Matt? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, are you trying to call Buck Johnson a predator?
Oh, shit.
To this day, I think one of the greatest jokes
I feel like
only
a
7
martyr.
people would ever get on a podcast was when Steven set up Cyprian for that predator joke. It was like a 17-minute setup, and it was pure mastery.
And neither one of us had any idea what was happening.
That was brilliant.
It took me a minute. I was like, oh. Anyway, to get that joke, you have to listen to a number of podcasts.
I was going to say that is
You have to listen to like 15 hours of podcasts.
That is a deep cut.
So
start at Liberty
talking
Lockdown
about
100 and go from there.
So talking about the political power thing, I've spent most of my professional career in management. I think it kind of, you see it in the management world. Like you have the managers that do it because they're good at it and because they naturally feel inclined to lead people. And then you have the ones who do it because they want the power, they want the money, they want to tell people what to do. And I think and it's the same in politics. Like you can really distinguish those pretty easily and quickly 90% of the time, probably, because they do have much different styles, and they do like the ones who lead because they lead well are the ones that people are like, oh, that's like a really good boss. That's one that I really enjoyed working for. And the ones who do it for the money and to boss people around, those are the ones that everybody hates. And you see that pretty easily. I
even
think.
in the corporate world, it seems like the ladder that you're describing, just like in politics, is who seems to ascend to the top.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
I
the
don't
ones
know
that go
what
all the
that means.
the ones that go all the way to the top are the ones who are seeking power for the sake of power.
And that seems to be
I'm-
the case in the free market, or in the managerial free market, or in the managerial government.
right. Like I'm plateaued in what I'm doing because I don't want to do anything more. Like there's too much corporate bullshit that's involved with going up to the next level, and I just have no interest in that. I like working with my guys. I like being on the floor. I like doing the things that I do, and I make really good money doing it. Like why would I want to fuck that up? And yeah, so that I mean that is a maybe a structural problem with the way the system is designed, is that the people who are good at it and do it for the right reasons don't want to go beyond that because they see the bullshit that's involved at those higher levels. Is there a way to diffuse the bullshit at the higher levels where that the people who are actually good at it want to be like, yeah, we should keep doing this. There's more steps that we could take to be better at this without getting strangled by whatever it is.
Boxcars and guillotines.
Well, I think there's I mean, there's still some decent CEOs out there, right? And there's plenty of other presidents of small businesses that do, very, very well, that are actually looking out for their employees.
I think small businesses is the key there, though, because when you come to the corporate America structure, I mean, look, Tommy is the expert on this, and probably of all of us here. Like in ESG America, like no, you can't go higher than that without becoming completely woke or completely something.
Yeah, you have to
something
become.
different.
You have to sell yourself, and that's the thing, and that's why I spend
It's a
most
legal
of my,
requirement now.
I spend most of my money at the little farmers market down the road. So.
Well, I would also maybe I would put in a slightly different frame there, but I would say that you have to adopt the dominating ideology or religion of your country. And that's what you see corporate America doing, is adopting this decentralized, non-theistic religion. I mean, that is what I mean. That is the only. I think that is the only. As far as a song that I wrote back in like 2012, if you can believe it, but that's been a theme of something of what I've kind of always noticed about the corporate world and the political world, is that it's what are the words? Is that they're trying to play God on the basis of no religion, right? And so we just see that far more manifested now with the pronouns and with the DEI requirements and with the ESG requirements. I mean, shoot, I just heard a conversation recently where somebody was complaining about the fact that we're coming close to year end and our diversity numbers aren't great. Right? It's like our diversity hires are a problem. Like we're not hiring enough people with the right classifications. So I do agree that now, especially at a certain level of corporate advancement, you have to adopt this dominating religion. But then that kind of answers then what must be done, as it were, which is to say you have to reestablish a better moral center for people, and they will follow that rule by and large.
I'd like to actually do an episode on this with you, LB. Like, I didn't know you had thought so deeply about it. So this would be something that you and I should get together on and do an episode on.
Sure.
It's amazing how much we take for granted. Like, because even before we had the word woke or heard of ESG, I mean, even stuff like, as far as I remember, I always put my race and my ethnicity on a job application and never really thought too deeply about why that was. My wife just, she just came here and started applying for jobs, and she's like, why are they always asking me like my race, like where I like, this is such racist shit. And she's like, appalled by it, as she should be, because it's like, what the fuck? But it's like, this is. And she's like, this is just so racist. I'm like, oh no, this is what makes you not racist, by asking everybody about their race and ethnicity. Don't you see how it works here? Welcome to America.
And she has an advantage. Make sure she puts Mexican on there.
Of course. I'm like, yeah, no,
I was going to
sure
say, she doesn't even get to put
Latina,
Mexican, though.
Latina AF.
Yeah, her and I have the same classification, right? My mom growing up was like, you're white, but when you apply for anything, you put Latino, because that's going to help you. Right. It's I mean, obviously, right, I have European ancestry. It's fairly evident. But to the point is, it's like, oh, but I'm still
my
Latino,
wife is whiter than me, but she's
or
Mexico,
Hispanic.
so Latina.
Yeah, Hispanic, which is just a bastardized Anglican word if I've ever heard one. But it's something that was something talk about that, of that always constant identifying. I think it's even worse for millennials and in the internet age, because we've been doing that since our AOL instant messaging profiles, right? And that was, and again, whenever, you know, we can go, let's go down the road. When did you get your first profile like that? Mine was when I was in middle school.
I was gonna say you were like 5.
I was probably using the computer regularly when I was like, yeah, I think my parents weren't like throw a screen in your face kind of people, right? And I grew up in a time where of dial-up towards at the beginning. I got high-speed internet pretty quickly, but to the point, you're always identifying yourself to the outside world, and then when you couple that again with this just the cult of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? When you have that be the moral center for a people, this is how people react to that gravitational pull. I think that's ultimately what we're talking about when we're getting at the idea of culture. We talked about the concept of power. Power disembodied has many different forms, and I think this is part of the fusion of thought that's happening now. As you're realizing that business that power that exists in the business world, of course, that's going to exist in the political world too. It might, but and people are, and there are jerks in the business world as there are jerks in the political world. Instead of thinking, as I think this, you can trace it to a hyper rationalist scientific viewpoint that wants to categorize everything into neat little boxes, right? So there's the political space, and then there's the cultural space, and then there's and then there's the business space. It's like, well, no, we're actually all beings inside of that at one point in time, and right. So that's where, and that's, I think, that's a far better way of viewing things than, like I said, that hyper rationalist scientific thing where everything has to be taken apart. And again, you see this demonstrated in the university system, right? What's been the overarching continental influenced goal of the university is to become hyper specialized in a niche, to where and these are the people who
not a niche.
Right? No, not Nietzsche. Well, some people for Nietzsche, but not everybody, right? That's kind of the idea. And whereas if you can take a different approach, which is I think something that's broadcasters and creators do a lot now, which is it's more of you can call it generalism, but really I think it's about synthesis.
I still feel bad for y'all for having to use Latino when I'm married to an African American.
Yes.
Does she put African American on her thing?
She runs her own business. She didn't care.
That's not the point. I'm trying to make a joke.
Here's an interesting generational descriptor for you, or like a generational partition. LB, I think you're the youngest here, right?
Yes.
Of the group here. So did you in high school have to take typing classes?
No, I took that in middle school and grade school.
I didn't.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So so they were being phased out. I took typing classes, and by the time I graduated, the incoming freshmen weren't taking typing.
Is that not a thing anymore?
They didn't even know I was going to be
that
typing was going to be a thing when I was in school.
It's like you don't have like classes on how to walk.
Tommy learned to lay rocks on the ground in a letter formation.
No, I learned how to write in cursive, like something y'all didn't learn.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah,
I did. I learned to write in cursive, and I translated to typing.
Yeah, I went to Catholic school. I learned how to write in cursive, and
I learned in cursive, but by the time and they required us to write in cursive up through 5th or 6th grade. But once we got into like junior high and high school, the teachers didn't care anymore. So.
I can still remember a freshman year history teacher wanting me to write in cursive, and it just being an impossible thing for me to do. To where
everybody wave at Tommy's wife.
To where I could have I think I almost failed that class because I couldn't write in cursive anymore. And I have horrible handwriting, for the record. Like people look at my handwriting and they think I should be a doctor.
I did have a college professor that he wrote all of the notes on a blackboard in cursive, and like half the class couldn't read anything that he wrote because everybody had forgotten how to write in cursive by the time we got there.
I also went to school in Texas, so they just probably thought computers were a fad. So they were just like, that won't be around in 5 years. So.
All right, Buck, I saw you writing stuff earlier. I need to know what's in Buck Johnson's notes. Buck Johnson is the most meticulous note taker I've ever met in my life.
I do usually take notes. That's funny you say that because like there's the interview from the other day, but I wasn't. Now it's like habit. I get.
It's just something you have to do.
Yeah, and now it's like not a nervous tick, but I don't have my Zippix toothpick here with me, so it's like, and I'm just taking all of this stuff in. I was thinking when Matt was talking, and you guys, it's funny, a lot of it kind of came all together, I guess, organically, but about you have to believe something and just have this nebulous idea but not act on it. It might as well not exist, because if you're not going to act on it, do you really believe it? That's the entire of our, I mean, I say entire, that's 90% of society right now, is saying things that you don't actually believe, because all you have to do is say them, and that's a status at this point. And we've, of course, all know these examples with the Ukraine stuff and the jab things on your profile. I guess maybe to correct myself, the one thing that a lot of people did was they'd have the jab thing, and then they really got the jab. So I guess they did believe that kind of thing. But our whole society exists on just saying things and not actually following through with a genuine belief of it. So when you hear someone like Matt say this, it almost sounds radical, but maybe not to us, but I think it would to a lot of people. And I think if you wanted to break down someone, just kind of an NPC, ask them a few questions to dive deeper into the surface layer of what they're telling you on politics, of course, or maybe even religion, but there's nothing right below it. There's nothing there anymore. And then it either devolves into an argument or to calling you a name or something like that. But it's just the society is built now on bumper sticker, buzzword, boilerplate slogans. And it's so strange. And I think, to LB's point, having studied something like Mises and human action, that still sticks with me in my mind when I'm having an argument with an NPC about something or other. And I'll say, you don't really believe it because you're not doing it. Like, human action is actually what would demonstrate your true belief in this item, XYZ, whatever it is. But you just say it. I mean, I can say anything, but everyone does say anything. Men can get pregnant. No one actually thinks through that and believes it, right? It's just a saying. So anyway, that's where my mind was going through all of this. It's just thinking we're immersed in this type of thing right now. And I think that's what makes seeking something deeper than that more appealing to people like the ones in this discussion right now, and in the discussion on the side too, I would say.
And maybe that's where, like, a lot of the value, and I guess what all of us went through, you might say, is in Austrian economics. That I don't think any of us reject Austrian economics. It describes economic realities in a way that actually makes sense. But then at the same time, I think, did I need to read 1,000 pages to know that? Could I just look out my window and just observe what people are doing and understand the same thing? So it's like, yeah, I think for us, maybe for certain type of, like, people that are intellectually minded, that maybe I feel like I need to read 1,000-page books to think I actually get something. But in reality, when I look back, a lot of the things I've learned from books, and, like, they were really just telling me things that I could already see around me, like even now when I go back and read certain religious texts and I thought were silly when I was younger, I look at them and I see, oh yeah, this is just telling me what I already understand around me if I just take the time to let it sink in.
I think sometimes it helps to see maybe a more accurate perspective on some of these things. I mean, for me, for sure it does. And that's why I'll hear a podcast or read a book, and it's something they'll say something that I had kind of been thinking, but then it clicks better when you see it written by a more or spoken by a more articulate person. And it's like, yes, okay, that is kind of what I was getting at. And I think a lot of us felt that way when we first encountered Curtis Yarvin's writings, maybe, and things like this, and Mises. And Matt, it's funny you say Austrian economics.
Or just Ron Paul saying stuff on a stage. It was
correct.
Like, oh shit, yeah,
correct. And it makes it okay, kind of, to think what you were thinking when you hear a quote unquote authority this says the same thing. It's like, okay, so I'm not crazy. That is what I was thinking. You heard a lot of people say that when Ron Paul got big. I'm not crazy. He cured my apathy. And Matt and I were just talking because I know there's people that will lump many of us in this chat and say that we're anti-libertarian or something like that. And for the record, I'm not. But Matt and I were just speaking at dinner the other night on our date that the Austrian people within the Liberty Circle are the ones that we agree with the most. The Jeff Deist, Lou Rockwell, and the people at the Mises Institute. They're always the best ones, as opposed to Reason Magazine or Cato Institute. It's because we still have this natural pull towards Austrian economics, and so I thought that was interesting as well.
And like for
I
people
think,
like,
oh, go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
I'm like, I don't know, man. Maybe I should just let Tommy talk. I mean, I've talked for like 598 episodes of this thing, and I forgot what I was gonna say. So go for it.
I was just going to say the people like Jeff Dice or Lou Rockwell, they are solely focused on the truth. They're not trying to church it up to meet any false principle or to score some points. You know, and
I'm not trying to score points with anybody.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so good, is because
people you want to follow.
Right. You know, you're reading like a well thought out, real ideal that is not pandering to anyone.
Not a coincidence. I've never seen a cringe headline from the Mises Institute, from Mises.org.
Right.
And I've seen, I don't know, dozens, hundreds from Reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
That's not a coincidence.
I still get the daily Reason email briefing because I do find their perspective. It's one I'd like to know, even if I disagree with it about 70% of the time, probably. But it's funny, depending on what the topic is. Like they were big on sending stuff on Roe v. Wade, and I knew it was going to be a cringe take before I even read it. I knew they're looking for pro-abortion stance and how to cloak that in liberty terms. And the same thing, they're looking for pro-sex work, is they love that term, sex work. They're looking for pro-prostitution points of view and cloak it in freedom. So I've always found that funny about these guys.
Going back to an analogy I made before, right? Because they're the question they're asking is, how do I justify abortion?
Bingo.
They don't people like that are asking, how can I justify abortion, or can I justify abortion? Whereas others, I think most of the people here include, is like, well, I don't think killing a baby is right.
Correct.
It's not a matter of can I justify it. It's that is it a life?
But more importantly, we don't have the desire to try to justify it.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not going to spend any time doing so. And I think what's interesting about that is the people who are on the other side of that, they're always expecting the conceit of left liberals is that theirs is the only enlightened position by definition. And so I think one thing that is interesting about the idea of an American right that we all sort of fall on is realizing, like, for me, that was like a clairvoyant moment where it's like, oh, that's because I've always taken an anti-Marxist stance throughout the entirety of what can be considered an intellectual career, including in university settings. And there was always little things that would happen that didn't make sense. And people explicitly saying like, oh, you shouldn't, you probably won't get very far because people won't like those kinds of things, right? But then in the narrow world of college, but in the broader world, I think in the broader world, it has an effect as well. There is a power in saying things and calling things for what they are, and a lot of people are programmed to run away from that sort of authentic expression and authentic search for truth, if you will. Right. And I think I focus more. I try to focus when I have conversations with people, especially people who aren't aware of the fact that I do this. Right. I'm more interested in trying to interact with them at where they are, and to kind of see if there's anything we can do or any consensus we can come to. So like going back to that same interaction, there was a moment where, we didn't talk politics the entire night, except in that it was something that we talked about dating. And it was funny how the same sorts of things actually manifest in that conversation because in part that goes back to what I was saying before, is really, this is it's not even a politics question. It's a morality question. Right. And if you don't get the morality right, the politics are beside the point, to a certain extent. And so, but there was one moment, I think I used the term weak men, right, which is like a meme, and I kind of used it on purpose. And she recoiled, and I'm like, well, don't you think it's a weak man who tells a girl that he wants to have an open relationship so he can sleep around? Like, that's because I was right. And it's like, oh yeah, well, I agree with that. There's just he was like, you're so frustrating because you go one direction and then I think you're going to go one direction. You say something else. That was something that Plato Socrates was said to have had, was that, the idea of like numbing people into a sense of they didn't know which way was up. But I think it relates well to the people who are just willing to speak what they know to be true. And that's something I think that's evident. And the more you're clued into looking for that, the easier it becomes for you yourself to say those same things.
Well, Matt had to bounce, and I could keep this going for hours, to be honest. And I know the chat could keep their conversation going for many more hours. But the truth is, in 6 hours, I got to drive my wife to the airport about an hour and a half away. So I'm gonna wrap this thing up. But we should do it again sometime, and I have a feeling we will. Whether it's on probably not this podcast, maybe some other podcasts. This will happen again in the future. But thank you all for hopping on here. This is the most last minute thing ever. I had no show planned. Toss a link to some people, and you wonderful people all showed up for me. So thank you so much. Check out King Pilled, Matt Erickson. Check out Fact Check This, Justin Campbell. Check out Been Awake, LB Muniz. Check out Counterflow with Buck Johnson. Check out Year Zero with Tommy Salmons. Did I miss anything? If anybody wants to shout anything else I missed.
Your show.
Vote for Buck.
Lions of Liberty. Thank you guys so much. Oh, wait. Maybe you can join me together. Speaking of phrases and things of this nature.
Yes.
It's been a while, but perhaps you could all join me in wishing that everyone out there could live long and live free. Not bad. I'll take that for not knowing it was coming. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all coming on.
Appreciate the script.
All right, this will end the second that I can find the finalized transmission. Actually, my StreamYard is in Spanish because I'm using my wife's computer. It's finalizar transmisión. Adios.
Adios, amigos.
I can't actually